So hello, and thank you for joining us for our Feed, Read, and Grow Lactation Education Series. I'm Sheila Umberger, and I'm the director of the Roanoke City Libraries, and I am joined today by Dr. Cameron Johnson, our local pediatrician and lactation consultant here in Roanoke, Virginia. So Dr. Johnson, being a librarian, I recently read an article where the CDC said that 60% of mothers don't breastfeed as long as they intended. There are a lot of different reasons, but one of the top ones was supply issues. Can you speak a little about how to know what that is and how many new parents know their baby is getting enough breast milk?
I love that statistics from the CDC because it speaks so volumes in terms of our culture and the support that we give to moms as they're trying to breastfeed their babies, especially with returning to work. I'll add to your statistic, about 85% of women attempt to breastfeed in that first month, but by 6 months of age, that baby is down, the population is at about 25% of babies who are still exclusively breastfed. And the World Health Organization and recently the AAP have put out a suggestion or a policy statement that babies should be breastfed until age 2. That's new in the last couple of months for the American Academy of Pediatrics to kind of get in line with the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization has had that in place for many years. However, especially with all of the changes that we've had since the pandemic and all of the research that's been going on recently, we know very clearly that babies who are breastfed have better outcomes, and moms who breastfeed have healthier lives. So it behooves us as a society to work toward the public health benefit of supporting breastfeeding. You're right, the supply is the biggest issue, right? And the supply being, do I have enough, do I have too much? And both of those have big issues for both mom and baby because they can cause disruptions in lots of different things. The biggest way we can assess mom's supply is really based on how the baby looks at the breast, meaning is the baby comfortable and swallowing? And that swallow is the most important assessment. When babies are suckling, even if they are not swallowing, you'll see their mouth moving, even a little bit of a head bob almost as they're suckling. But the swallow has almost an audible K sound. It's very faint, but you can hear that swallow as the baby is gulping. And we really want to see them doing that rhythmically in a good pattern and not intermittently. We don't want to suckle, 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 swallow. We want to hear that audible sound. The other thing that you can tell by watching the baby is how they act after they're finished. They usually can finish a full feeding and they're nice and relaxed. Their arm almost becomes like a wet noodle. Versus when babies are still hungry, they ball their hands up in a fist and they put it in front of their face. It's almost hard to get them onto either onto the breast because they are in the way with those hands. And then after they're full, their hands relax and they become much more comfortable, and we call them milk drunk.
I had not heard that. That's really good. That's a good way to remember how they should be.
Now the other part of that is, and the most objective way to tell if they're getting enough is their weight. So those close follow-up with their healthcare provider to make sure that they are gaining weight appropriately is super important.
Right. That's so true. I know a lot of people, that's what they want to know. You know, it's, how can you, you've talked a bit about how you can, what moms can do to help increase their milk supply if they find they are producing either too much or too little for their baby. So is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
You know, there's a lot of myths out there on what moms can and cannot eat that would be potentially harmful for their child. And for the most part, moms can eat anything that they want during lactation because it goes through mommy's gut before it gets presented to the baby. So there's no truth to avoiding onions and broccoli and cauliflower and sushi. It doesn't matter. There are some foods that can be a help for mom's milk supply. Specifically, we call them galactagogues, and they are foods that can help to kind of give the precursors. Those are, the common ones are things like oatmeal, and the least processed oatmeal, the better. So steel cut oats would be better than the instant oatmeal. Flaxseed, which is a very nice supplement that has lots of fiber in it. You can grind it up and put it in your oatmeal. And the other thing is some nutritional yeast that can be a benefit to the breast milk. There are other foods out there. Those are the most common and easily accessible. I have lots of moms who will make cookies. They're oatmeal cookies.
I like that idea.
And that's a nice way to do it. Having said that, you and I can eat all the lactation cookies that we want, but if we don't have a baby who's suckling and pulling that milk, it won't make any difference. So daddy can eat all of the lactation cookies as well. So it really comes down to a good latch.
Right. So what advice, I know lots of mothers that have had great success pumping while other mothers struggle. So what advice would you give young moms about pumping and storing their milk?
Oh, that's a really good question, and one that is so common, especially as a lot of women go back to work. In general, we try and encourage moms not to pump before about the 3 to 4 week mark, and that really has a lot to do with establishing mom's supply based on the baby's need. So, you know, when everything is going wonderfully, the baby should tell mom's supply how much to make. And moms usually make an oversupply in the beginning, and then it calms down. You'll hear people talk about that engorgement, and it goes away within a few weeks. We want to start pumping at about the 3 to 4 week mark because that helps to establish an opportunity to introduce the bottle for the baby in a way that is not going to interfere with their ability to latch.
Right.
We don't really start pumping to store for when mom goes back to work until just a few weeks before they go back to work, because mom's milk is so designed to match the needs of the baby that we don't want to give a 4-month-old milk that was pumped when the baby was 3 weeks old. We want to give them the milk that is designed for their true chronological age. So usually pumping with a good flange about the time that the baby would actually be feeding will help maintain that supply when moms go back to work or have to be away from the baby. Sometimes the pumping doesn't work well, and there's a variety of reasons for that. It's important to have a flange that fits well. Ideally, it will be a double electric pump. That seems to be the thing that is most effective at pulling. It doesn't have to be a double electric pump. You can also have a manual pump, which is just done with squeezing. And then some women will actually do well with just hand expression of that breast milk and being able to collect what they need with just essentially a massage technique to be able to pull that milk down.
Can you talk to us a little bit about where the best resources for getting a pump and any costs that are associated with that, or tips on that for families?
Yeah, that's a really good point. There are lots of opportunities for new pumps, some that are double electric pumps that plug in. There are pumps that will plug into a car adapter. There are remote pumps or even hands-free pumps that you can use. Really, it comes down to kind of looking at the type of pump that you're looking for to meet your needs. So for example, someone who is going to be on their feet for long periods of time may have a different requirement than somebody who has a private office and has the ability to pump that way. There are lots of different vendors for pumps. The nice part about the Affordable Care Act was there are parameters put in the Affordable Care Act to be able to support breastfeeding and lactation, and one of which is the insurance companies provide a pump. Now, different insurance companies do that in different ways. Some will just reimburse you for the pump of your choice. Others will just send you one. And you'll have to check with the insurance providers to see what your opportunities are. There are also pumps that you can rent. Most of the hospital systems will have a pump that's a hospital grade pump that you can rent for short time periods and buy the flanges to go to fit you. And that's a nice short-term option, although I have many moms who just use that consistently because they like the way that it works for their lifestyle. The other thing that is a good possibility would be the WIC program that supports moms with both lactation support as well as with pumps. And being able to talk with the lactation consultant or the nutritional support person at WIC would be a great resource to be able to get that pump for free too.
So is there anything you want to add also about storage?
The storage.
Yeah.
Storing the milk is important to be able to maintain its integrity. Generally, it's good for a few hours after it's pumped. Generally, we say about 4 hours, it's okay to refeed that milk immediately. Not the same for formula. Once the formula is opened or used, that time is about an hour. But you can use it and store it in the refrigerator for a few days, the pumped breast milk that is, or you can freeze it, and it's good, depending on the type of freezer it is, it's good for several weeks to months. And there are lots of resources out there on how to use that, and usually the lactation consultants or your healthcare provider will have those resources as you're going through the process. You want to try and store it in smaller aliquots. Now, some people will store it in an ice cube tray, which is about an ounce at a time. And some people will use a bag to store it in. You just don't want to have to defrost large volumes at a time if you're not going to be using those in a shorter time period. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So thank you so much for joining us today. This is really good information. We're so thankful for your passion for supporting our community and our children, and again, thank you for being with us today.
I'm happy to be here.